Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Reading the Gospels from the point of view of leadership offers us many wonderful insights into our own leadership. After all, watching how Jesus leads is the best way to discovering what he expects from us as well. Leadership, of course, can mean many things, but when you look at how he was towards his disciples, you can't help but notice his intention to influence them as profoundly as possible. He does this through words, through teaching, through example, and most powerfully, through his presence. Well, hey everybody, hope you've enjoyed our sessions here on watching Jesus lead. This is our fifth, and we're just going to wrap it up with this one because, it's kind of like what John says in his gospel, that if you wrote everything Jesus did down, there wouldn't be enough room in the whole world for all of the books that would have to be written. That's literally in the Bible. St. John wrote that. And you can almost imagine his mind, because John, of course, went for the depth. When you read his gospel, you see that he's seeing all of the relationships between Christ and the Old Testament and trying to understand he's literally overwhelmed at the truth that is coming from Jesus and just how wonderful he is. So he says, you couldn't even write a whole book, a whole world couldn't contain all the books that you'd have to write if you wanted to say everything that Jesus did, And it's like that when it comes to his leadership as well. We could hone in on this as a theme and literally read the Gospels in that light and go on and on about it. But before we move on, I want to at least meditate with you here on an aspect of his leadership that we really need to imitate ourselves. And it's one of those hallmarks of what a Christian leader really needs to be able to give. And that's the insistence of Jesus on him giving himself through his presence, his personal presence, right? And when you look at it closely, the whole gospel's full of this power of his presence. First of all, he is God made man. He's the Word incarnate who came down from heaven to earth and dwelt among us. 30 years of his life was in the domestic household, in the presence of Mary and Joseph, in the presence of his cousins, in the presence of the people of Nazareth where he lived, or Egypt or Jerusalem. He kind of moved around a little bit there at the beginning, as we know. He was present. And it's remarkable, very little is said about his first 30 years of life, almost as if to underscore the fact that you don't have to be doing things all the time in order to be achieving God's will, in order to be glorifying the Father, in order to be living life to the full. I think sometimes we are tempted by this, and it's something we have to remember, because the world will give accolades for our achievements, for our actions, especially if our actions are excellent. But when you think about that, that's kind of a two-edged sword because, well, yes, it's wonderful to receive an accolade, but only those who get noticed receive those accolades. And if you have to really struggle to get noticed, well, then it's almost like saying that your success is dependent on whether or not others recognize it. Right? It's a big temptation in our lives because you say, oh, I want to be like, this great star or that great star, or I want to be like this leader that everybody can, give accolades to, can glorify in a way. Aristotle actually, going way back 400 years before Christ, said that glory or fame or public recognition of your excellence is the most attractive material thing that there is for a human person. But he listed it as material. He doesn't say it's spiritual. He says it's a thing of the body, because he says at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because that means that your success is dependent not on you, but on the opinions of others. And he also gives examples when he's talking about this, saying that, it's kind of funny because some people who received those accolades or who received the attention and the approval of the crowd went on to get it removed when later on the opinions of the crowd changed. And he says, it doesn't seem like this is really fitting for a definition of success. Isn't there any way to go deeper? I mean, is leadership really just a question of following the whim and the fancy of public opinion? Jesus goes a lot deeper than that. Even without people noticing him or giving accolade to what he was doing, he was in fact influencing the world. His presence may not have been noticed, he may not have manifested a lot through it, but in fact, he was already laying the seeds for an effective outreach that would come. And he was setting, so to speak, the stage for a long time by his presence. Because if the people didn't know that he was of them, from them, with them, they wouldn't listen to him. He had to come from his own in order to save his own. It's the very first law. Remember this line, I like it very much. Love is the bridge truth walks across. You can come out all day long saying all kinds of truths, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to listen to them. People are going to listen to truths that come from someone that they trust. And so you first have to build the trust with your audience. You first have to build the trust with the people that you lead. It's not a title that makes you a leader. Power is not given to you by a title or by your company. Power is given to you by the people whom you lead. And it's the followers, in fact, give you the power to lead them because they trust you. They see that, in fact, you are someone worthy of their trust and you are someone who's leading them to good things. In many ways, it's the follower who makes the leader, right? And a good leader will know that, and a good leader will keep in that bond of trust with the follower. This is exactly what Jesus did. And he stayed close with the men who were around him. He showed his transparency by his presence and living, sharing life with his disciples. Everyone could see who he was. There wasn't a question of Jesus doing something nefarious on the side. So Jesus, they knew because they could see, they lived with him. His presence gave him credibility. This is a very important little thing that we can take with us. If we're struggling to gain the trust of our family, the gain of the trust of our children, the gain of the trust of our spouses, do they see us? Do they see, in fact, experience that we are good? Right? And so, of course, in the same thing in the workplace. If your desk is always pushed against a wall and you're with your back to the door, and you don't interact with anyone who's out there, if you don't come to the different functions that your company puts on, if you don't show from the front that you're just as engaged in the process as you're asking the people to be engaged in the process, well, it's obvious that they're not going to trust you. There's a gift of just being there that actually builds a bridge for the people to then understand when you're giving direction or the direction that you're taking, that it's a good thing because you're with them. It seems like a simple little law, but that's because it is. Simple, but not easy, right? Because in the end, the temptation is, gosh, we're all so busy. We all have so many things to do that we take for granted the presence that a leader needs to have with the people whom he is leading. And the morale boost that comes when a leader is able to be present. It's a morale boost because the leader has a unique capacity inside of each one of us to see the end goal, to have the passion for where we're going. Christ came to the earth because he knew the Father, and he came to the earth to bring us to the Father. Well, that is something all of us want. All of us want to know our Father. And Christ comes to the earth saying, I'm here to reveal the Father to you, to bring you to your heavenly Father, the end goal of your whole life. So of course we're going to love him. And of course we're going to want to be near him. His presence actually brings us to the end that he is connected to, the end goal that he's connected to. So it's kind of like the leader's a bridge. It takes the people across their leadership to what is good for the people to have. Right? So Christ, the bridge builder, comes in and offers by his presence easy access to the one to whom he wishes to lead us. Right? The closer he is to us, the closer we are to the end goal that he has come to bring us. Right? Now, it's the same with him, but it's also the same with any good leader. Any good leader will have the same quality. People will love to be around them because the leader makes them better. Right? So it's a real question for you then. Why wouldn't you want to be around your people? if in fact you came for them. And that's the first correction. A Christian leader puts their people's good first. And that's the number one reason why the people trust them. And then brings their presence into that workspace, into that zone of leadership, so that the people can, by associating with them, find this end goal that their hearts seek.
Would you like to hear more from Father Nathan? Join the St. John Leadership Network and receive a 2-minute glance at the gospel every Sunday morning right to your phone. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So what do we mean by the leadership of Christ? Leadership has as many definitions as there are people who try to define it, right? And we can understand that. It's one of those things that's kind of like justice or democracy. There's so many definitions for it, but we all know what we mean. And I think all of us understand that one way or the other, leadership is the influence that a leader brings to the people whom he influences or who follow him. And for Christ anyway, studying that influence means that we got to say, how is it that he brought that influence to bear? And when you look at his life from that perspective, it becomes really a great example for us, right? He shows us that leadership is not something that just happens, that is something that happens through your actions, right? And so first of all, like for example, he preaches. But he doesn't just preach what he knows. He preaches what the people need to hear. I remember this little, parable that I heard one time about teaching where it says that young teachers teach what they do not know. Mature teachers teach what they know. And how true this was of Christ, of course, who knew all things and who was God himself, that he would condescend but then look to teach us. But then look at what that teaching meant. It means that he's empowering the ones whom he has come to serve by his leadership. Because nothing gives a person more direction and impacts their life more deeply than truth. It's a funny thing because in our society today, we've kind of forgotten the value of truth. And it's kind of a scary word for a lot of us, but it shouldn't be. Jesus says that in the Gospel of John, Jesus says that the truth sets you free. Knowing truth sets you free. What does that mean? It means that it allows you to direct your life from the inside, to be really responsible, to own your actions, to say that you know and have chosen the course for your life. And here's Jesus who's giving that to the apostles. He's not always telling them exactly what to do. He's instructing them so that they, in their freedom, can then do what is good for them to do. What a gift. Well, that's leadership. So he could have said to everybody, you just have to do what I tell you to do. He could have, said, I have all these rules and laws and you have to obey them without understanding them. But instead, Christ came and he told the apostles about the Father. He told the apostles about heaven. He told the apostles things that, are kind of vague or at least didn't define everything in every detail on purpose, right? Because he was instructing them in a truth that would set them free. So that's one example of his leadership, right? Teaching. He's influencing his apostles towards their own autonomy and their own freedom by teaching them truth into their, in their minds, giving them the intelligence of faith. But he does more, right? Not only does he teach them, but he also does things. He shows them actions for them to imitate. You think, for example, the way that after he feeds 5,000 people in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, 5,000 men, not counting the women and children, so there have been 10,000 some people, right? Enough food for them all to eat, which is such an incredible miracle, with no ovens, no ingredients, just giving them copious amounts of bread. He goes and dismisses the crowds and then retires to pray in the mountains alone. What an example this is for the apostles. How would you have known what to do if you hadn't, when a crowd gives you adulation and you're being swept along by the frenzy of the public, if you hadn't seen what Jesus did? He withdrew, giving them an example. Or another example is when he shows them the way to confront the Pharisees of their day, the opposition in front of them. They might have thought, well, you're supposed to negotiate with this, you're supposed to compromise this or that. No, Christ speaks plainly, gives them an example. This too is a level of influence. Teaching is one, example is another. He wants them to see what he does and also wants them to see how he does it. He's passing on. He'll tell them, go out, for example, and do these miracles. And he sends them out 2 by 2 ahead of him. Remember that? So that they can then be on their own proclaiming the kingdom of God. And they come back rejoicing because of all of the different miracles that took place by the working of their hands. They're doing, in other words, what Christ himself did. And this huge moment of empowering as a leader, where Christ, using his influence, sets them free for them to do the work that's in front of them. But he's also insisting that they do it like him. See, there's another aspect to his leadership, which is to not just give what to do, but to show the how, the culture, in other words, that surrounds what we do. Without that culture, what you do will end up degenerating one way or the other. Leading human beings is very different from leading robots, right? Like, it's not just a question of programming people to do things. They won't. People are motivated to give great work because they enjoy the process of the work itself. The how the work is done is equally as important as what they're doing. You can't have one without the other for long. You just tell people to go out and do this or that like slaves, and they're going to rebel. And so Christ instructs a lot about the culture, about the way that they are to fulfill their ministry. Seek the lowest place, he says. Wash the feet of those whom you are called to serve. Do like me. Imitate my gentle leadership with the people that you're called to shepherd one day. But even more than words, it's his presence. It's the power of Christ being with them so that they can see all the places that go beyond the words. Not just the big deeds that he does, but the little deeds he does before the big deeds. Or the way that he follows up upon the big deeds, or the way that he recreates, rests, comes back, interacts with people. All of this forms the kind of culture around his ministry that you can only pick up on by living with him, right? Well, in the same way, in our leadership, you can talk about culture, you can hear your values, you can put them out. It's the way that the leader embodies those values that shape the way that people embrace them, right? You can't just define things intellectually. It's how they're lived out. That's, again, the presence of the leader. So there's just a real question for each one of us. Am I close with the people that I'm serving? I mean, really close. Like, I could ask them, do you see enough of me? I remember a story that was told to me by Clay Mathiel. Clay Mathiel, as you know, took over Imes Pet Food as a really small company and then grew it into a $2 billion company before he sold it. And he said, in that whole journey of his leadership, he always made a point to memorize the names and faces of the people that he would see in the plants that were producing the food before he visited. And one time he would go in the back door of the thing on purpose, the plant on purpose, to kind of go in where the employees go in. And there was one particular plant where every time he would visit, he would greet some of the folks that were in the back of the plant on different forklifts. And as the company grew and his stress became more involved, he started to take a break from that. He no longer greeted them because he said, in the end, like, he didn't think it really mattered that much to them. Until one day, when he was asking his people for feedback, one of the guys on the forklift said, Mr. Mathiel, you used to say hello every time you came in. That meant so much to me. And I haven't been greeted by you in the last few years. And I feel like the company's changed. And Clay said that was it. He would never do that. He would greet the people from now on as a first priority, because as he acted, so the people felt the company was. That's the power of leading with presence.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, Go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
You know, I always find it fascinating being a Catholic priest, especially doing leadership work, because I get to watch the world and interact with the world outside of faith, right? Because as a priest, of course, you can just tend to be in the bubble and be around just the people that believe, and you're trying to help them with their lives, and this is a very good thing. But a priest doing leadership work in companies like I get to do, I get to see the world kind of as it is without God. I get to see what kind of ideas are competing for space with the values of the gospel. And sometimes it just makes me smile because it's almost like the world will get the wrong answer. I'm not quite sure that the gospel needs to be defended as much as we just need to show how beautiful it is. Because one of the great things about the gospel is that our leader was present. Like literally gave value to being connected in time and space with those whom he was leading, namely Jesus, who lived with his apostles. What an amazing thought. And meanwhile, and then you look at the secular world, and secular world is wonderful in many ways. I'm not here to, criticize it, but I'm also like, we act like we can replace intelligence with artificial intelligence. We act like we can have the machine generate emails for us, and we can just sit behind a camera instead of going out of our way to be together with the people. And of course we can. There's an efficiency there, but it's not all bad. But at the same time, the secular world seems to have forgotten the value and the irreplaceable value of being present. And so that's fine, but like a Christian leader is called to, in as many ways as possible, bring the whole package, bring a culture along with action. And that culture that they bring, you can't bring without being present. And of course, I'm saying you can be present virtually. That's already a form of presence. But you see, even that is a good thing. To be aware, even when you manage via webcam, that in fact, your body language, your tone of voice, the background is all a gift to your people that conveys something, messages something. I'm thinking of the law that was developed by the psychologist Albert Mehrabian. And he says that only 7% of what people understand is our words. The things that we say only impact a person. 7% of the impact is made by our words, whereas 38% is made by the tone of our voice, by the way that we say the words. It's very similar to what we're looking at here in terms of like the culture. You got a small amount of success is determined by skill. There's a lot more of success that's determined by the person's working environment, the collaboration of the team, the motivation that the company has, the way that the person feels coming into work. And then Mehrabian goes on to say that 55% of communication is done just by body language. Well, if you were to take that same rule and apply it to Christ, 55%, over half of what he was communicating in terms of leadership with his apostles came just from the way that he lived, just from being with them, 55% of it. Whereas 38% of it would come from the dispositions that he showed to them while he was teaching them. And then 7% what he actually said. Now, I'm not going to say that that's going to be accurate, because with Christ, everything's a little bit different, right? Because he's God and there's the Holy Spirit and etc. But you can see in general why the presence is so important. If Mehrabian's rule is correct and 55% of what we communicate comes through our body language, and 93% of what we communicate is not even done with words, then I think it's a great spot for each one of us to start as a Christian and say, what kind of presence do I leave? What kind of presence do I give? I can't help but, especially as a Catholic priest here, speak about the Eucharist. I mean, this gift of Jesus in his body and blood given for us at the end of his life. Why would he want to leave behind this memorial saying, whenever you do this, do it in memory of me? Why would he want to be remembered? It's because he wants to be present. It's amazing. And as Catholics, we believe that he's present in every tabernacle of every Catholic church in an absolutely unique way that's irreplaceable by any other. He's there, body, blood, soul, and divinity, at every Catholic church's tabernacle. That's amazing. And of course, other denominations understand it differently, but we all understand his words that he told his apostles when he said, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. See, the influence of Christ is that he doesn't just give influence, he gives himself. This is another aspect I think that's essential to Christian leadership, that we're not just here to accomplish a task. We're here to accomplish a task in solidarity with the people whom we are influencing. We're here because there's a bigger picture in the world than just making whatchamacallits, right? There's the collaboration, there's the teamwork, there's the humanity of the world of work that is essential to us as Christians. We have the obligation to help remind the world that work, labor, is a wonderful thing. It's actually something that builds up humanity. And one of the ways it builds up humanity is that we do it together. That the influence of a leader is not non-human, some sort of robotic command from a computer. No, the influence of a leader is done, through their presence. And when we do that as leaders and give our presence, we're giving something much more. We're giving something of our heart. We're giving something of who we are. And that blesses us as much as it blesses them. And we need it as much as they need it. We're following in the footsteps of Christ, a God who made himself present and then gave his presence as his last gift in the Eucharist, in the Holy Spirit, in the power of his word. He's reminding us that in the end, our Christian life is not just about doing things. It's about the relationship that motivates all the doing, our relationship with God.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.